Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carb and Fasting. Now, today's guest is not a scientist, medical doctor, nutritionist, dietitian, but a lawyer. Now, if you're wondering what a lawyer has to contribute to this sort of healthy lifestyle space, stay with us because we are going to discuss the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, and their role in our sort of food safety, etc., and the FDA, which everyone knows about, the Food and Drug Administration. We're going to also discuss food labeling regulations and regulations, if they exist at all, with respect to keto or low carbohydrates labeled foods. So our guest is New York attorney Antonio Martinez. I'm going to refer to him as Tony during the interview. Tony, welcome to Low Carb and Fasting.
Hi, Nayiri. It's a pleasure. It's always great to see you and your great smile and your passion to help others in this is always it's always inspiring. So I remember meeting you at one of the conferences, and so I'm delighted to be able to contribute to this discussion.
Tony, thank you for your kind words. Now, we're interested in your personal story because each of us has a personal story where that actually brought us into this sort of the low carbohydrate space, right? But before your personal story, why don't you introduce your professional yourself and tell our audience more about your professional background and what branch of law your firm deals with?
Okay, so I am an attorney. I've been an attorney now. This is going to be my 27th year. And prior to that, I was always been involved in government relations. So I've always been interested in science and health. Actually, I should have been a doctor. I try very hard to really understand the science and know what's going on in terms of the health. It's very personal. I was involved with the passage of major legislation here in the United States called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which created a separate category for dietary supplements in the law, because there's a law called the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, and supplements were considered part of in that food section, but that law changed and created a separate category. They're still regulated like foods, but the Food and Drug Administration has always had a difficult time with supplements because they look at them more like as medicines or drugs, and it's always been a challenge. It's been a regulatory challenge because supplements are not drugs, and there are people that want them regulated like drugs, and that would be very bad for the consumers if you had to pay. Look at just what the price of medicine is. So we fought very hard to carve out a category so that they could exist. And it's been an evolution. I mean, because even though the law was passed in 1994, it's still evolving. And here we are coming up to almost 30 years now since the law was passed. So I worked with consumers and industry, and we got the law passed relatively very quickly. It was at the time in 1992, 1993, the top issue that the United States Congress was getting mail on, this was before the internet, was vitamins. And it became this huge mass movement that the legislators said, yeah, no, we got to do something. We got to get something done. We didn't. We got the law passed. A little bit about me personally. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2002. And I come from a family of diabetics. And I was also heavier when I was a younger man. I had weight issues, but the real turning point for me was I had a heart attack in 2014, and in March, at the end of March, and I had to question everything that I was told, and also had a, what I would call a, come to Jesus moment, because in the 90s, I had the privilege to work with, and I knew personally, Dr. Robert Atkins. And doggone it, he was right. And when I strayed, I paid for it. I thought medications would allow me to do, whatever I wanted to. And it was a false sense of belief. And it really hit home when I had the heart attack. And so I watched a documentary called Serial Killers, not the SER, but the cereal, like in food cereal. And I got to see the great professor, Dr. Tim Noakes from South Africa. And everything just came together, and I just decided after the heart attack, I said, I'm going to go keto. And my doctor was like, when I told him what I wanted, it's like, what? What are you? And I was like, no, I'm doing this. And he said, well, we're going to have to test. We're going to have to check. So I start going keto in July, and I do my first set of labs in early September. I had, my cardiologist, who was the attending at the ER when I went to the emergency room that day, and she told me, she said, if you had waited a little bit longer, you might not have made, you may not be here. So I had a, real serious, a wake-up call. And so I start the keto diet in July of 2014, and I get my first set of labs in early September. And my doctor calls me up and he says, Tony, what have you been doing? And I said, nothing. I said, I've been following this diet. I've been following this advice that you were against, and most of your colleagues are against. And he goes, well, I've got good news for you. He says, you have a normal A1C. I can start to take you off of medication. I was like, great. That was the first time I had a normal A1C for the first time in 12 years. I was always under the guise of that somehow it's okay to have an abnormal A1C, like, that's okay. And you could take your medication and all of that. Crazy, really crazy. And that somehow an A1C of 7 is acceptable, which is when I was admitted to the ER with the heart attack, I had an A1C of 7.
Or somehow that it's genetic and there is nothing you can do about it, right?
Exactly. I tell people, diabetes, I use the metaphor, diabetes is a dragon. And if you can keep the dragon and in its cage, but your behavior will determine whether you release it and whether it breathes fire on you. So the idea is keep the dragon in check. The dragon will go to sleep if you don't pester it. You know, it's, yes, I can't, you know, and then, you know, my background is Latino, and in our culture, eat a lot of rice and beans and plantains and all that stuff blew my blood sugar. I mean, I haven't eaten any of those things. I haven't eaten rice and beans. I haven't had rice in probably 8 years. I have cauliflower rice, but I don't have rice. And beans, maybe I've had Cuban style black beans, maybe one, but alone, or with cheese or something, but never with rice. And plantains I can't have. And I loved plantains, but you know what? It's okay because I eat very well. I eat meat every day, high quality. And the fact that I don't have to eat 3 meals a day is another thing that allows me to budget so that I could actually spend more money on a higher quality dinner, higher quality food, higher quality meat. Because people go, well, how do you afford this? I go, well, I'm not eating 3 meals a day. Why aren't you eating 3 meals a day? Aren't you? I go, I'm not, because I'm not hungry. That's one of the other benefits of the diet is there is a high level of satiety. And this business that you can't be on this diet long-term is also, that's been not my experience. I've been on this diet now, going on, 9 years. In July will be 9 years. And, I basically weighed the same. And maybe I've had my weight fluctuate by 5 pounds over the last 9 years, but it always, set point. And then I exercise, and my exercise includes cardio and weightlifting. You have to do some type of resistance because you have to put your body in a muscle building position. There is another theory of health that says if you are building muscle, you are in a state of health because the human body cannot build muscle if it's not healthy. You can't build muscle or build strength if you're sick. So that's one of the things that you follow. And so good. And it's led me to, everything from a public policy, legal standpoint, and ask hard questions and think about how we can make changes to improve the system.
Tony, back to your health. You mentioned that your A1C obviously improved on the keto diet. How about your other health markers? How about your heart health?
I only see my cardiologist once a year. And I had a coronary, something that I did was I got a coronary arterial calcification scan. And what that is it actually measures the amount of coronary plaque in the arteries. Here in New York, it's relatively inexpensive to get. It costs $100 and you need a doctor's prescription. It's not covered by insurance, but you can get a real understanding as to how advanced or not your cholesterol profile. I mean, if you're black, because you can have a very high cholesterol and a 0 calcium score. So that is another misnomer that cholesterol is really not the best marker of heart health. You have to look at a number of factors. Heart disease is a function of inflammation as much as it is an abnormal lipid profile. And basically my triglycerides, I've kept them the less than 100 all this time. I got my triglyceride to HDL ratio always to under 2, and I got it as low as 1.5. And I've noticed that, I can get my HDL, when I had my heart attack, my HDL was like 25. And now I've gotten as high as 45, 50, it's almost doubled but it takes a long time. It's also a reflection of the long-term damage that, metabolic dysfunction, metabolic syndrome does. And, normal blood pressure, the last time I went to I was, 110/60, and, all the numbers were good. And on the calcium scan, they do not measure the calcium score where you have a stent. So obviously we know where there was a stent, there was a blockage. So they don't count that, but they look at the other arteries. And I have some plaque in the LAD, the famous Widowmaker artery. But the good news is, from baseline, when I had it measured back in 2019, 4 years ago, the score has not gone up. It stayed, it's stable. It has not gone up. And that's another thing that you're looking for. I mean, ideally would be great if it could, you could reduce it and the numbers go, and that can happen. I had 1 year when the score went down. You also need to go back to the same facility to use the same machine, because there's so much variable, but that's what I do. And, but I still have no progression from baseline, so still, within the score. That score was 39. I had a 30 score of a 39 in the LAD. But all the other scores that I've had have been less than 39 and I get it measured every year as part of my routine. And then I follow a protocol that works off the research that an engineer named Patrick Toit developed for himself. And I think Patrick Toit's a brilliant man. He really has a good understanding, because like most engineers, they look at the heart disease differently than the doctors. They look at the entire system and they go, okay, what is going on here that is causing this, and looking to get to what the root cause solutions might be, and making adjustments there. And his protocol is following a diet, supplements, and exercise. And I've been doing that, and thank God I feel fine. So that's what I've been doing.
Do you mind me asking which supplements you take?
I take a lot of supplements, but you look at it, it's what I call them my system, my system. So for blood pressure, and I thank Patrick, because he says you just can't look at just like what that number is. You have to think about, well, your arteries are like pipes, and they need to be flexible and tensile. If they're hard, even if you have a good blood pressure, that's still not good. The pipes, you have to look at everything. So I take a bunch of supplements for that. And I take vitamin K, D3, magnesium, tocotrienols, which is a vitamin E derivative, and a multi, vitamin C, all these things, they all work together. You want to keep your liver in a state of cleaning up and doing its job, which is really air traffic control for the delivery and departure of all the different substances, the lipids and the carbs and all of that stuff. When you think about this from a spiritual perspective, it's really awestruck to imagine that I believe in God, but when I think about it and I go, oh my God, what an incredible design the human body is, and what the organs can do, and with great reverence and respect to the creator of this, because wow, and how everything is programmed. I mean, when it comes to blood sugar, I'm always reminded, because I always take I wear a CGM, and I think it's very important that if you're doing this program, you should use a CGM. I'm just waiting for Apple to make it available on the Apple Watch, and that will be a transformative moment for society. When everybody's checking and understanding that what food is doing to them, and all the glucose spikes, and all the different, how it's all related, people will then wake up and start rethinking food and what they're putting into their body. So, but it's a humbling thing about when I do this. But even, like I said, even as a type 2 diabetic, you warn me, because I look at my CGM and I see how my body is always working regardless of what I do, to try to get it to 90, because that's where it's supposed to be. And it's truly fascinating. So
that's wonderful. Yeah, I wear a CGM too. But that's because I'm type 1 diabetic. So I absolutely need to know what my blood sugars are every moment of the day. So, okay, so we'll move on to your to the USDA and the FDA. Everyone knows about these. Everyone sees them all over the foods. What are these entities responsible for exactly? Let's start with the FDA.
Okay, FDA is in charge of the regulation of health, right, and drugs, and it regulates foods for safety. Although that responsibility is shared in part with the Department of Agriculture, at least when it comes to meat, and it's responsible for the labeling of health claims for foods, drugs, and it is a policeman. It's a regulatory law enforcement agency. The Department of Agriculture regulates the marketing and, in some respects, the supply of food. And it only deals with, where it gets into the health side of it, is it deals with food safety. So we have a Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, which inspects meats. That's like when you go and you buy, and the USDA inspected and it grades the meats, select, choice, prime. But it doesn't regulate the health claims. And here's the thing, it's tasked to be responsible for establishing the dietary guidelines. But really, if you think about it, that's really something that the FDA probably should have done. In a perfect world, I would love to see a separate agency for food and health claims for food, a totally separate regulatory category for foods and supplements, because the drug category, there are so many products that can't be properly evaluated as drugs because the process is both too cumbersome and too expensive. And no one will invest the money unless they can get a substantial return on investment. So there are a lot of good products out there that are orphans that will never see their full potential, because, like vitamin D, we went through this pandemic and we know that vitamin D plays an important role, but we still have not done the science to get a full understanding and make a formal recommendation on how best people could use that to protect themselves against things like, the role that it plays against things like what would happen with COVID. So, but no one will spend the money because, no one can get an exclusive on vitamin D. I do the research. I spend the millions on the vitamin D. The way the market is, once I do my research and I go to market with that vitamin D, you can also put out your vitamin D and compete with me. But is it fair because I did the research to prove the benefit that you get to also take advantage of that? So that we have to fix that here in this country. And that is a challenge because there's a lot of rethinking that has to be done. But something needs to be done because obviously we know there was a whole category of healthcare that was utilized for things in the pandemic and utilized in health. Like with these supplements that I take, I don't take aspirin every day. I take a supplement that an enzyme called nattokinase. Nattokinase comes from fermented soybeans. Natto, from the product natto, it's very common in the diet in Japan. Yep. Notice Japan has a significantly lower incidence of cardiovascular disease. When you think about, like you use the example of aspirin and nattokinase, aspirin is a blood thinner. It makes the blood thinner so that it's harder to coagulate, because that's what causes heart attacks, is the coagulations, the blood clots. Nattokinase dissolves blood clots. It is a clot dissolver, okay? And where you have the theory is that where you have coagulation or too much platelet aggregation, nattokinase works to stabilize that and dissolve that, so you do not develop clots in the first place. And but no one, like I said, no one will spend the money on nattokinase to do all of this research to drill down its potential, because again, who's going to get an exclusive on nattokinase? And if nattokinase I can make in my house, in my kitchen, with soybeans, and I can also buy it as a supplement. So this is the challenge that we have when it comes to regulating these things.
So, so other than for meat, which is inspected, and I suppose eggs as well, inspected by the USDA.
Yeah, grade A, yeah.
Yeah, eggs, I noticed inspected or approved, I think, by USDA. USDA approved, I think it said on the egg cartons when I was in California. Now, is it the FDA that's responsible for the health claims of, say, heart healthy symbol?
Yes.
Which you see on cereal boxes?
Yes. Correct. They are responsible for that.
So they're responsible for that.
There is
their approval to actually put heart healthy sign on cereal packets, which are actually nothing.
Yeah, well, they do it based upon a process where, you know, they were first given the authority to do it by Congress, and then they created a system in place to say to the public or to food manufacturers, if you want to make a claim, here's the process, here's how you can petition, provide the evidence, we'll make a decision on it. And, you know, we'll, you know, if it meets the standard, we'll allow the claim to be made. So there's a number of FDA approved health claims. Whether they've made any difference, you know, we don't know, and whether they are actually correct, because when you know, there's this claim for saturated fat. You know, saturated fat has been demonized. And despite the fact that the science has come out that saturated fat in and of itself is not a cause of heart disease. And yet regulations say it's heart protective. And I mean, there's this now bureaucracy in place to keep this information in place. It's like once this gets put into the system, it's very hard to undo it. Like many things, once you allow something, it's very hard to take it away.
Do you think behind closed doors, exchange of money is taking place somehow?
No,
No?
I don't believe in the conspiracy theories, but I do believe that there's an undue influence because it is all marketing, because all the food companies are scrambling to put their best food forward, because they want those recommendations, because those recommendations determine what hospitals are going to buy, what schools are going to buy, and it's all financially related, but it's not always necessarily in the public health interest, unfortunately.
Tony, you and I were there when Nina was presenting at the conference. She was obviously talking about the dietary guidelines. Now, you also mentioned earlier on that the USDA is heavily involved with the dietary guidelines. Should they be? Why should they be involved with it?
The dietary guidelines are kind of an oxymoron, because these are dietary guidelines for healthy people, and 80% of the population is metabolically unhealthy. And so why would we be making the recommendations that they're making to eat? And it's all carb heavy, and it's low on protein and low on fat. And then you have to ask yourself, in the food space, what types of foods are the most profitable? The cheap grain, the easy to produce side of the equation. And the United States subsidizes, they'll pay farmers to grow this stuff. And so we need to maybe rethink all of that.
Yeah, I've always been annoyed by that fact that certain grains are subsidized by the
corn.
Like corn.
Most people don't realize corn is the most energy dense food on the planet. And when I say energy dense, well, what do you mean by that? Well, think about it. Corn, we make alcohol, whiskey, is made from corn, and then you make ethanol, fuel like gasoline. It's very energy dense. And if you're diabetic or you have any type of metabolic health issue, why would you be consuming a food that is so energy dense? When you have a problem, diabetes is a disease of energy management. You're not able to manage the distribution of the energy because you're either impaired by, either you don't have insulin where you have to provide it in a type 1, or you have insulin that's not responsive in a type 2. Yeah. Because of insulin resistance. So that in and of itself, so why would we be eating corn? And I'm a guy who loves corn. I mean, used to love going to the movies and getting a big bag of popcorn with butter and all that. And but then no wonder after I'd eat that, I was like knocked out,
I haven't had one of those in 8 years. But so why does the US government still subsidize? Because I understand that came about just after the Second World War.
Yeah.
The subsidies. So why are they still subsidizing corn and soy? Soy is another.
Because the Farm Bureau depends on it. It's guaranteed money.
It's guaranteed money. Yeah. Yeah.
And, a principle that I think we all need to think about is that, we need to have competition in the marketplace where we're assuring always the existence of certain products and certain foods at a certain price may not always be in the best interests for the public. I mean, we have an energy problem, but we're not really using the corn to some extent, but we could be using it more. Brazil is a country that's energy independent because they grow the sugarcane, and they've created a system where their cars can run on ethanol, pure ethanol, you know, or a much different mixture between gasoline and ethanol, not like we have here in the States, where, you know, you will not see, you know, gasoline ethanol concentrations where the ethanol is more than 10%, max maybe 15. Then there are these flex fuel, but we're not there yet. So, I mean, these are things, but when there are subsidies and we're growing all this corn and we're trying to get everybody to eat it in cereals, I mean, like, it's not really the best or most well thought out system. These are things we need to work on changing.
Who can change these? Who has the power to change?
The U.S. Congress. And it requires people to be active, you know, like get involved, register to vote, go to town hall meetings, talk to your elected representatives, because they have the power to make the change.
Right, to your congressman.
Correct.
Let's talk, Tony, about the you shared a site which was about the food, what was it called? Food regulations, that website.
Oh yeah, on keto and low carb.
Online.
Yeah, most people don't realize there is no official, legal, enforceable standard for the term keto or low carb, and that has created a wild west in the marketplace. What I mean by that is people have been playing with that term, calling their products keto or keto friendly. What the hell does that mean? And then they play with things like no sugar added to give this impression that it doesn't have sugar, but you can have, you know, you can have a lot of, you've got to really look at labels and really look at ingredients and do the math. You know, if something's called ketogenic, you're making sure that the maximum amount of carb, 20% of that caloric value, if it's more than 20% carbohydrate, it's not ketogenic. And in fact, to be what I call keto safe, you probably want that number to be 10% or less of carbohydrates.
But more than
because
that, even if something is genuinely ketogenic, doesn't necessarily make it a healthy product. Like all the processed foods.
That depends on, I mean, you can, junk food can be ketogenic.
Yeah.
So, and that's something else that when you do this lifestyle and this diet, you really are avoiding the processed foods as much as possible. You're eating real food. You know, it's like, you know, I'm not eating cereal. You know, this morning I had 2 eggs fried in Spanish olive oil. That's it. You know, I don't eat cereal. Don't eat rice. And if I eat fruit, it's really a limited number of fruits. And I'm conscious of the carb content because I know my body can only handle so much. And glucose spikes are not good for you.
No.
They're shocks to the system.
True. So if the FDA is regulating or they're responsible for the regulation of other health claims on other food products, why is it that they're not taking on keto labeled products?
Because people haven't complained enough.
Is that how the system works?
The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And when they get, get to some outrageous examples, then they, step in. They're not proactive in this regard.
So
but it's also a reflection of industry, because if I was an ethical keto product manufacturer, I would be getting together with other ethical and trying to point out who's the bad actor, and I'd be going to Congress. You'd be doing the things that a trade association does and say, listen, we need regulation here. It's the Wild West. This is unacceptable.
You heard it here, people. So all those products that you see on the shelves that have keto-friendly or keto-safe or diabetes, even diabetes-friendly is another one that the UK is big on. Diabetes-friendly, you pick up, what does that mean, diabetes-friendly? It's like, it's friendly to whose diabetes? Like, what do you exactly mean? There are no, so what is there a legal meaning to these terms?
No, and that's a problem that, again, that has to be addressed through through regulation. And we're not there yet, unfortunately.
So there are two problems here. A, these labels aren't keto-friendly or keto-safe or whatever. They're not regulated. And B, they're not clearly defined. You don't exactly know what keto-friendly is, for example. What makes a food product keto?
Yeah. So, and I don't see a solution yet because industry hasn't organized enough yet, or things have not gone as bad. Things are not bad enough yet.
So consumers haven't been hurt enough.
Right.
That's what we're
Unfortunately, that's usually what happens when people really get harmed, And of course, there's physical harm and financial harm. Like, I can think of a particular food manufacturer that sells chocolate and claims that their chocolate is keto friendly and all of that. And hell no. Every time I've used that product, I get glucose spikes. And they don't do anything about it. They claim because they use certain products that it's quote unquote keto friendly. And they're still putting that stuff out. And I just tell anybody who's diabetic, avoid this particular brand, because do not rely on it. You literally have to test. If you're diabetic, you literally have to test and see how your body responds to the products.
So misbranding is a big problem. So Wild West, I like it that you call it Wild West. Yeah, misbranded products. Always check the full ingredients list, the nutrition facts.
And always test the product on yourself to see how you respond to it.
Yeah.
Because what they don't tell people, and this is a reflection, diabetes is a progressive disease, and your level of damage, beta cell function, incretin function, can be different than somebody else's, dependent on a number of factors. So you may be able to tolerate more carbs than the other person, and they're both diabetic. So you really, this is where it's individualized. So that's another important thing. Just don't assume. What? Excuse me. That's what. Yes, that's why your CGM is your best friend. He'll tell you the truth.
Yeah. And also full ingredients list, like even meat products, say bacon. 99% of the bacon that I would see when I was in California, we stayed there for 3 months, right? At major supermarket chains, right? 99% of bacon or sausages had glucose syrup. And high fructose corn syrup or some other junk added to it, and that's a meat product. Why would you add glucose syrup? I mean, I take glucose syrup when I'm having a hypoglycemic episode to actually save me from dying.
Ketoacidosis and dying. Yeah.
It's crazy that they're actually adding glucose syrup and that sort of thing to meat products.
Well, they're adding sugar. They add sugar to a lot of things. So you know, just read labels.
Yeah, always read the labels. Yeah. I even saw glucose added to cheese. So yeah, you have to be careful. Well, Tony, we're running out of time, and I think that's a good message to end this on. Always read the labels. Don't trust the front of the packages usually when they make claims that this has no added sugar, or this is diabetes friendly or keto friendly or safe, heart safe or whatever. Check the full ingredients list.
Of course. And if anybody wants to reach me, my website is acmartinezlaw.com, or they can email me at acmartinezlaw@gmail.com.
I'll put the details in the description below. Antonio Martinez, thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.
When you're this way, and we'll certainly, you know, there's a number of people I've been meaning to get together with in the UK and from our community, and you're on the list.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye-bye now.